All right, we're going to get started. Welcome, everyone, to this week's Talent Talk. We're talking about workforce strategy today. I know the title said, whose job is it anyway? Whose job is it anyway? We are going to be talking a little bit more about that today, and I'm excited to dig into this. Workforce strategy is something that comes up all the time and work with my clients through Ardent Services. It's something that lives in the back of my brain, even as a talent acquisition professional or a recruiting specialist or an HR business partner, whatever you want to call me, it's always in the back of my mind and sometimes comes to the foreground, especially in different seasons throughout the year when we might have a lull in certain areas of recruiting and other things start bubbling up. And so workforce strategy is always one of those brains that's going in the back of my mind. So let's get into it. I want to make sure that you know who Ardent Services is, who I am. We'll get into that just a little bit, just a tiny mini introduction here, because I feel like it's important to know who is hosting this webinar. So Ardent Services, we're turning talent challenges into turnkey solutions. We love a good alliteration phrase there. But our mission is really to elevate talent acquisition as an integral part of the HR ecosystem and company culture. We address the unique talent acquisition needs of each team and develop a holistic strategy for recruiting and retention, okay? So it's not just recruiting, we go beyond to retention. You cannot have one without the other, all right? The ethos that we follow here is collaboration over competition. We are made better by our community and the partners we work with, and that includes you. So we'd love to connect with you afterwards if you have any questions, or even if you want a copy of these slides, feel free to reach out to us. There's going to be plenty of times that we show our website, our email, our different social tags. So we would love to be able to connect with you soon. Okay, so who am I? Who's talking with you today? My name is Tiffany. Hi, hello, nice to meet you. I am a recruiting innovation specialist, an HRTA partner, as I mentioned before, also a player coach strategist. These are just some of the names that I've been given from the clients that I've worked with, or just as I come into all of these different ecosystems and the different teams and the different companies that I've worked with in the past. All to say, I think it's important that you know a little bit more about who you're working with and why you should listen to me at all. So I'm just going to run down a few quick high points, okay? So first off, I have 15 years of talent acquisition experience. That means recruiting, that means staffing, that means corporate recruiting, that means freelance recruiting, that means headhunting, whatever falls under that talent acquisition bucket. I've got 15 years in that space, and I've loved almost every minute of it. Any other talent acquisition professional would know. I can't say that it's all been just rose-colored glasses and a walk in the park, right? But it has given me some great experience to pass along to the teams that I work with today. So I also have 5 years in agency recruiting. So I worked in a staffing agency called Kelly Services. It was, a big dog in the staffing arena back in the day, and still is to this day. They were well respected, and I was proud to be a part of their team as a staffing supervisor. Then worked with our business development teams, and then became a branch manager and managed multiple branches and locations across the Chicagoland area, and just really got a big brain for everything staffing. So we worked in commercial, with specialty and on-site partnerships. We worked with, workman's comp, unemployment, light industrial, and I-9 compliance. That was all part of my brain, just from me kind of sticking my neck out, putting my hand up and saying, how can I help, while I was with Kelly Services. Then I moved on to a little bit of a different gear in my professional career. That would be in corporate recruiting. Okay, so I did field and retail leadership roles at first as a field recruiting supervisor, and then went into legal and marketing and sales ops, DevOps, IT, HR, specialty departments, all these different things in our corporate recruiting initiative. So I managed a team, and I also did some recruiting myself. So that was kind of where that player coach mentality really got to grow. And then I was also a D&I liaison. If you want to know what that means, contact me afterwards, but it's been a really fun space for my brain to grow there as well in terms of talent acquisition. Okay. Lastly here, I have been as an independent TAHR consultant with my own business, Ardent Services here, for the last 7 years, like I said, and I've worked with startups and industry disruptors, the crazier, the better, the weirder, the more interested I am, it seems. So I've worked on, both early career recruiting, early stage recruiting, and then also, solo recruiting projects. So what that means is I'll be called in to work on just about anything at any stage. And then I've also worked with these high growth stage small to medium businesses, and just really been this creative linchpin. If you bring me in to work with your teams for one of my brains, whether it be recruiting or this workforce strategy brain like I'm talking about today, you're usually getting at least 5 to 10 other brains that are coming in with me. So that's my creative linchpin value add that I bring into all of these different teams and different clients that I've worked with. So that's a little bit about me. This presentation, this whole webinar is not about me, but again, I feel like it's important for you to know who I am, so that you know where some of my perspectives coming from. If you had someone else doing a webinar or putting together a presentation on workforce strategy and whose job is it anyway, or why it matters, or what their thoughts are, you'd probably want to know where their perspective is coming from. So that's why I want to just give you a little bit of information here, but let's jump into it, okay? First off, let's go over a bit of a summary of what you're going to really learn about, what we're going to dig in on with each other today. So first off, the elements of strategy are really important. We need to know where to start. So that's our base point that we're going to start from. Number 2 is this execution matrix. So everyone playing their part, what does that look like? How do we execute efficiently and not stumble all over each other and trip each other at our own, yard line, at this 1 yard line. So number 3 is ownership and ownness, okay? Feeling clear and confident about your role, your responsibility. Remember that word responsibility when we get to that 3rd block of content here. And then 4 is the contact concept. That's an original phrase that I think I've come up with from my own brain, but it's probably just from an aggregate of learning experiences. The contact concept. What is that? What is that? Well, you're going to want to stick around until the end here. We'll try to get through this content as quickly as possible, but I do want to give you that concept. What does that look like to have reciprocal efforts that affect your success? What does that look like for you and your teams? It's different for everyone, and you'll hear me say a lot through this presentation. Each of these things is not one size fits all, okay? So we're going to try to cover some buckets and some really useful tools for all teams, but they are made better by customizing them and working with a consultant like myself or some of the partners that we have here with Ardent Services, which I'll talk with you about a little bit later, to make sure that this makes sense for your team and that you are understanding this and not just following along blindly. Because if you get anything out of this presentation today about whose job is it anyway, we really need to remember to stay awake and stay alert, and stay really engaged in this process as we all define what strategy is, whose part is what, and what we're doing and where we're going together, okay? All good? All right, let's move forward here. So elements of strategy, where to start? Where do I even start? Okay, when I hear workforce strategy, I don't know about you, but a few times in my career, I've heard this term and I've thought, okay, that means like workforce planning, right? Like I heard my HR friend say that, then we're doing workforce planning. And I'll be honest, in those staffing days, I really had no idea what that meant. Even coming into corporate recruiting, I was working in the field recruiting at first, and I didn't really understand all of what workforce planning meant other than as it related to growth. Okay, we have new positions. I need to recruit on them. Cool. Great. Got it. That locks in my brain. But I also heard things like talent development. When you look at that D&I liaison or that linchpin of innovation space, I got in with those L&D teams and the D&I teams pretty quickly, as soon as I got into the corporate space, because I wanted to know what they knew, and I wanted to know how I could support them and how I could kind of augment my talent acquisition or my TA brain. So talent development, very, very much a part of workforce strategy. Talent mapping. So where do we have all of our skills? Where are some of the skill gaps? Where do we need to hire for? Where do we need to develop? Go back to that talent development. This is all part of workforce strategy. I've also heard pipelining. So I think in my early days of recruiting, I understood really quickly what pipelining meant. And it was, make sure that pipeline never runs out and that it's, constantly replenished and that it has good quality in it. But pipelining is also something that you can do internally, to make sure that you are focused on talent mapping, talent development, and workforce planning. It all supports itself. But all to say, when you say workforce strategy, here's a fun exercise. Go out to your team and ask them to define on the spot, not using ChatGPT or Google, of what workforce strategy means. What is it? And how does it relate to them? You'll get a bunch of different answers. Okay. So we need to define what it is that we're looking at. And when you look at what strategy really looks like in general, and I've added some elements in here as to what workforce strategy incorporates. So you've got things like culture and the candidate employee experience. You've got D&I that leads into culture, and you've got all these different things of systems and tools and skills and assessments and inventories and performance evaluations. Holy cow, like let's get into that. That's the talent development space, and then training and development. And then you've got succession planning. And then there's that pipelining word again. Woo! I mean, a good strategy is complex. Yes, we cannot negate the fact that it is complex, but it's this complex network of systems and support functions. They support each other that can be streamlined and easily communicated to the rest of the organization. If you forget that last part of that statement, you're going to set yourself up for failure when you're talking about workforce strategy. If you cannot clearly, and I should have said clearly, not just easily, if you cannot clearly communicate to the rest of the organization what your strategy looks like, nobody knows what their role is. Nobody knows what you're doing. And nobody knows how they can support this complex network, this ecosystem, if you will. Okay. So basically, when we look at all of this, we could dig into each of these buckets all day. We could do a whole webinar on each one of these things, and we just may do that. But for today, we are focused on workforce strategy. So I want to sort of help my own mind and maybe help you as well to categorize some of these areas that we're going to look at together. Okay, so to streamline strategy, I want you to focus on these three key elements. It is engagement, okay, experience, and then expectation. So that's what we're going to look at today. And those three buckets only. We're going to categorize all of these other areas that we are going to talk about in this execution matrix in those three categories. Okay, so this brings us to our second bucket of our execution matrix. What is that? Is that a playbook? Is that an SOP? What is it? All of the above. But I am not interested in complicating and overcomplicating the process to help your teams work together. You'll notice in a lot of things that we talk about in these webinars and a lot of services that we offer through Ardent Services and our partners is all about efficiency and sometimes bringing in a sledgehammer and not an ice pick to smash the mold and get right to the core. But also just make sure that you're getting some quick wins. You need to feel efficient as early as possible, okay? So when we look at this execution matrix, everyone plays their part. You're going to see some tools similar to what we covered in previous talent talks here and in previous webinars where you can take a snapshot of this and share it with your team and say, hey, how are we doing these things well? Are we even doing these things? Should we look at this together, okay? So let's first off identify the key players. We need to know who's involved. Now, I will say to my L&D and D&I partners, my brothers and sisters in those areas, you are definitely on this matrix as well. But for the purpose of this webinar today and for the sake of time, we're going to save you for a special webinar later. Okay, so today we're just going to be talking about human resources, which will be indicated by HR. Those are their initials. Then we've got managers and team leads, okay? We're going to call them SLT, which is a way to abbreviate senior leadership team, okay? So this might not be your executives, but it's probably definitely your managers and your team leads, the ones that are working day in and day out with those teams, and they understand the day-to-day operations of that team and should know, we'll get to that in just a second, they should know their team pretty well. They should know the individuals and know what their motivators are, and they should have the tools as managers and team leads to develop that talent, okay? Then we've got talent acquisition. You know, my family over here in talent acquisition, TA. So I say TA a lot, and I forget that not everyone knows that that means talent acquisition, but talent acquisition folks are definitely part of this strategy. I think that the biggest mistake that I have seen companies and teams make is that they leave talent acquisition out of the equation and everything that we're about to talk about. So maybe I have a little bit of an axe to grind. Maybe I have a few experiences that could have gone better had talent acquisition been incorporated. And bear in mind that I've worked as a senior leader advisor. So I've worked directly with the senior leadership team. I've worked with HR. I've been called HR. I've been right up there in partnership with them and been, you know, as close as one can get And then I've also been all the way on the other end of the spectrum in the talent acquisition world. And oftentimes, as a recruiter who comes in, fills positions, and gets back out. But again, when you get my whole brain and I come in with these clients, I can't help but kind of put a little pin in that to say, hey, talent acquisition would really benefit to be a part of these conversations and be a part of this process and workforce strategy. Okay. So that's the reason why we're focusing on these three areas, these three groups of people and key players. So moving forward here, again, we're going to talk about engagement first. So we need to engage and have HR, our senior leadership team, and our TA teams all focus on a few different things. As you read through this list, you may see some things where if you're an HR professional, you may see something like, okay, conduct skills inventories. I got that. Okay. Or maybe I'm expecting the senior leadership team to do that. Or maybe I'm identifying skill gaps. Maybe I'm expecting the senior leadership team to do that. But why is talent acquisition down here communicating with the senior leadership team? That's my job. Why are they facilitating employee development programs? Why are they doing that? Why is that listed there? And I'm going to challenge you to kind of look at things in a different perspective, because if one person or one team is doing all of this, we're already failing. We're already tripping at the starting line. If you think that you're going to be able to do all of these things. And when you look at allocating some of these projects to other teams, like talent acquisition, helping to facilitate employee development programs. I've done that personally where I have worked with some of the HR and senior leadership teams and said, how can we as a talent acquisition team offer professional development resources? How can we facilitate some sort of a referral incentive or a development incentive that makes our jobs easier and also takes our talent acquisition brain, where we probably got a lot of information from the job markets and from these different industries that we've been recruiting in for the last however many months or years. And we'd like to come in and help facilitate development and partner with you. And it's not to say that the HR teams and any other managers or team leads wouldn't know how to do that just as well. It's just looking at this first execution matrix, I want you to make sure that you are dividing and conquering. Okay. So when the next column, you'll see an area of focus. So what does that mean? What are you talking about? Like a company? Well, how is the company an area of focus? What I mean is your company brain. So we're going to need HR to think with a company mindset. They're going to need to put the employee mind, that employee brain, that one that is focused on the employee, aside for just a second, because we've got to be at least a little objective up front. When you ask the senior leadership team to go through and align their team's capabilities, I want them to dig in with their teams and with their employees. Not think with their company brain. And I'll tell you why here in just a second. And similarly for the talent acquisition teams, why is their area of focus the company and not the employee? Well, because they are doing things that help support this overall ecosystem. If you're getting what I'm saying so far, it's that everybody has a part to play, and there is not a single person, including myself, that I have ever met that has been able to play all of these areas well and efficiently all at the same time. Okay. So when we're talking about engagement and we're going through these exercises together, it's best to divide and conquer. And then again, these goals, they might look different for your team. Again, we can customize these together, but what your goal could be as an HR team is to get clear on the inventory, get objective. Don't get all up in the employee brain and think, oh, I really like this employee and they've been trying really hard and they've been doing really well, or they've been here for so long. We got to think with our company brain in that HR space, and we've got to get real clear on where we're starting from, right? And then create a list of needs versus wants. We can talk about that forever and a day. But then, looking at each of these areas of focus, these goals, these descriptions of the task or project at hand, this is a way for everyone to work together. Collaboration over competition is not just a thing that I talk about as an ethos for Ardent Services. It layers into everything that we do, okay? So next, we're going to focus on experience. We're going to look at experience, that bucket, okay? Because otherwise, we're going to get these long lists and everybody's going to have 5 to 10 different initiatives that they have to focus on. And they're going to think, oh my gosh, that's a lot. That's a lot. Even if you're thinking, well, I could start with maybe 5, you're going to get so bogged down. You're going to get caught up in other things because we don't think with our workforce strategy brain all day, every day. We just don't. And if there's a person at your company that their sole job, their only role in the organization is to think about workforce strategy all day, great. Perfect. If that's the CHRO, if that's your chief people officer, whatever that title is for you, if that's the director of HR, whatever, that is great. But again, it's still going to require this collaborative effort so everyone knows their part. Again, remember, an execution matrix is all about everyone knowing their part. So that way we don't get to the end and we go, whose job is it anyway? Who was supposed to be doing that? Were you supposed, did you do that? Did I do that? Was I supposed to do it? You were thinking I was going to do that? This kind of clarifies everything. And we're going to clarify it one step further when we get to that ownership and own this piece. Okay. So as we look at experience, these are definitely experience-based projects. So we're trying to, in the HR realm, foster a culture of continuous improvement. Well, how do we do that? We work on succession planning. We work on, digging in that employee brain. Where is the employee going? And I would challenge you, especially in this experience bucket, not to think with your company brain. Again, I could get so deep into each of these topics and each of these matrix formats that you see here, but I will say that when you're in the HR realm and you're thinking in your employee brain all the time and not really zooming out and thinking about what the organization needs, you're going to have some pitfalls. You're going to have some emotional landmines at very best. You're at very least, you're going to be having those issues with not being able to really see the forest through the trees. Okay. So thinking with your employee brain, the goal for you is to be that safe space for growth and for challenges. Okay, so if there are developmental opportunities, if there is, professional development, learning and development, all these great things that we want to, put a positive spin on, but it feels like a challenge to an employee, you want to be that safe space that they can come to and say, I'm really struggling with this. I want to know how to work harder, work smarter, not harder. I want to be an efficient member of this team. Maybe they might not have that level of access or level of trust established with their senior leadership team. So that's why it's best that they have that HR safe space. That's the way that HR teams want to be perceived. That's what they promote, and we hear all too often that that's not exactly how they're perceived in the eyes of the employee. So this is the goal for that experiential stage. And here's some ways, some projects that you can start on with your employee brain intact to try to do that. Okay. Senior leadership team is responsible for conducting those regular performance reviews. As a manager or as a senior leader, even a team lead, if that's your role, depending on your team structure, if you are not looking at your performance of your team and promoting internal mobility and supporting succession planning efforts, you're already failing. We need to go back to the previous matrix here. We need to figure out where you really need to get clearer on what's going on, because in this area of focus, you're thinking with your employee brain. You're not thinking with your company brain. Okay. The company brain in this experiential matrix, if you'll call it, is actually going to pull us away from actually being able to get to our goal, which is establish the true north for your team. Okay. What I mean by true north, I had a leader one time, it might've been a mentor or a workshop that we were at, where they said, all right, everyone close your eyes, we'll trust you, or put your hand over your eyes, or maybe they had blindfolds at the time, but they said, all right, everyone point north. And everyone, depending on their various, levels of knowledge and skill, pointed in a different direction based on where they thought north was. Some were, a little closer to correct than others. Others were just like, I don't even know how I got here unless my GPS told me, so we were all pointing in different directions is the point. So what your job is as a senior leader or as a manager in general is always to get that true north very clear for your team and say, this is where we're going as a team. This is your role in that. So you've got to establish that true north for your team and help everyone to be pointing in and going in the same direction. Okay. So that's what this experience that you're supporting. And that's part of workforce strategy, is conducting these regular performance reviews, making sure that everyone's clear on what true north is, and supporting them in their map to get there. Okay. TA down here. Okay. TA is not always the afterthought. And I hate to put them down at the bottom of this list, and it's not in order of priority, right? But talent acquisition can play a crucial part in putting on their company hats. Okay. Their company brain is activated and they're thinking, okay, we are going to keep in mind our goal in this experience stage is to sharpen the tools and establish a repeatable method for success. Now, why would talent acquisition want to do that in this experience step? Well, because they might want to adapt some assessment tools and techniques that help them to better screen for talent. And they're going to learn from what HR and the senior leadership team are doing in this experience matrix. Okay. That's why this execution matrix is so important, because if HR is up here fostering a culture of a continuous improvement and doing a lot of other things other than just succession planning to, get to this common goal in the experience, and they're just myopically focused on their part. And then the senior leadership team is like, yeah, I'm doing my work. I'm doing, the regular check-ins and the performance reviews, and I'm doing promoting internal mobility. My team and I are great. We're all doing well in this ecosystem. And then talent acquisition is down here, developing tools and techniques, and of course, supporting succession planning, and making sure that HR has enough support. If they need some extra hands, hey, we're here to help. In some slower seasons. But if all of these teams are doing this by themselves and not communicating with each other, oh, what a mess. I've seen some brilliant, brilliant teams take all of these projects and execute them perfectly. They do them well. They check their own box. They check the box every time, and above and beyond, they check it. Okay. And then they forget to communicate with each other, and they forget to keep an eye on what somebody else was doing. They forget to incorporate that into their projects. And again, that complex network that supports, the whole ecosystem, they forget about that part. Fail. It crumbles. Or at very least, it has to be restructured. It has to be redone quite often throughout the year, and you can never get to a sustainable point. So that's the point of having these execution matrices and ones that are customized to your team to be really clear. Now, we can dig into what these look like. We can dig into, all the different ways that, you've put these together with your teams, all to say, these are giving you some easy snapshots. We're going to get to this final execution matrix here to make sure that you know how to address the expectations part. But all to say, when you drill down and you talk about this as a team, and even furthermore, when you get to this ownership piece in the next block of content, you'll really see the difference that it makes and how quickly it can make the difference. Not to say that I'm impatient, but I like to see some quick wins, and I like to get excited and get energized by seeing some results that make a difference. So here, let's get to expectations, okay? The last bucket of our execution matrix, all the things that we're looking at, all the different strategy elements, we need to categorize them somehow. So the last piece here, the third bucket, is expectations. So how are we managing this? How is our strategy, our workforce strategy, supporting these expectations that we have as an organization or as a team? So HR can be implementing assessment tools. Now, I know before we were talking about talent acquisition, developing some of those assessment tools. As we all know, there's internal, external processes for everything. So talent acquisition can and should be focusing on a different area of the business than HR. HR, may have governance and may have, a little bit of eyeballs on everything, but talent acquisition has a really interesting perspective at the front end, at that tip of the spear point, with developing some assessments and techniques in their interview structure to manage candidate experience, to make sure you're finding great employees for HR to then take and pass the baton to, okay? And they are implementing assessment tools. So they need to know that everyone that they've hired and everyone that they are, placing in these teams is actually able and capable of doing their jobs, especially as things continue to change. So there are a lot of L&D initiatives. Again, if you have really lean teams, sometimes an HR person is wearing an L&D hat, is wearing a D&I hat, is wearing a lot of different multiple hats. So again, not to discredit or to count out those L&D folks. If you have them, use them. They're wonderful. They're so knowledgeable. We have a lot of them as partners with Ardent Services. But point being, when you're developing those assessment tools, you are focusing on both the employee and the company. They have to do this. They have to marry. If you have someone that has an off skill or two, or they're not really up to par, and you try to do that, or it's not aligned, this is a mess as an HR team. I know I'm doing a visual with my hands example, because what is in my head couldn't possibly get onto a slide in enough time today to show you. But if you have an off pairing with what the company brain and the employee brain that you're thinking with is trying to do, you're going to have a mess to try to figure out, where do I put this employee and how do they wear into the structure and into the goal and into the infrastructure in the company. So you've got to address that. You've got to straighten all that out so it aligns nicely. So everyone knows what their role is. Everyone, it's not a square peg, square hole, but it's making sure that the company fabric supports the employee fabric and vice versa. Okay. So the goal in this area is to create accountability, promote expansion and elevation of your talent. I say a lot, the expansion and elevation, expansion and elevation. It means we're going to expand their influence. We're going to elevate their skill. Okay. That's what you're doing in this particular bucket of expectations. The senior leadership team is also focusing on facilitating those performance evaluations. HR plays a little bit of a role in this too. They might be the reminder of, but the senior leadership team, if they're not consciously aware of how and when and why they're facilitating performance evaluations, they're probably going to get busy and forget about it. And then it becomes an afterthought, becomes a rush process, which creates a poor experience for the employee, which we're not going to go backwards, but point being, it all kind of ties into itself. So they are thinking about creating these clear, concise, consistent individual team plans. Okay. And they are thinking with their company brain. They can't be all up in, the day-to-day issues of what their employees are dealing with. They're thinking with a company brain. This is an opportunity for them to zoom out of it. And then talent acquisition, they can conduct internal audits. Okay. They can help in looking at these talent audits saying, how many employees did we hire into marketing last year? How many are newer? How many versus how many have been here for a while? What type of skills, matrices are we looking at there? What are we needing to hire for? They can also be working with the senior leadership team and the HR teams just to kind of say, hey, can I take you out to coffee, or can I set like a 30-minute, meeting with you, so that way I can just pick your brain real quick. So it's kind of being a little bit proactive versus reactive, but it's keeping that line of communication open. And then also in certain times of managing expectations, some of their projects just need to be analyzing job requirements and employee skills at all times. They can get this from HR if HR has already done this work, or if the senior leadership team can already tell them in a 30-minute meeting what the skill gaps are, then take that information and take it and run with it. They can also provide market intelligence. Again, they're usually in these ecosystems and in these talent acquisition funnels for many, many, many months out of the year. Most people are only thinking about talent acquisition efforts and the job market and what it's doing when they need a new role hired for, right? Sometimes that's just the way that it goes. It's nobody's fault. It's not good or bad. It's just how it is. And so talent acquisition, though, is really the subject matter expert that should be keeping an eye on these markets throughout the year. They have this market intelligence so that they can, again, thinking with their company brain, thinking with a big picture perspective, get really clear on the expectations from those internal talent audits that they've done. They're analyzing the job requirements. They're making sure that they are ready to pounce, that they are prepared for the future. That is all about, that is the whole game of managing expectations with talent acquisition. Okay. So I hope you've got some great tools from these last 3 slides and some places to start. But again, we can work on this together. But I want to show you, again, kind of alluded to it a little earlier, what can happen when human resources is working on their own stuff and managers and team leads are working on their own stuff and talent acquisition's over here doing who knows what. They're all working on their own stuff. And maybe there is this really great communication loop where everyone's talking with everyone and, it's just kind of like this clear, consistent, everyone's kind of working around with each other. More often than not, this is what's happening. We have human resources maybe talking to our talent acquisition teams. We cut the managers and the senior leaders right out of that, okay? Then we have the talent acquisition teams being like, hey, remember that conversation that the human resource team had with the hiring managers? Can I get on that? Let's not play the telephone game. Maybe they want to intercept that communication. Then we've got hiring managers and maybe team leads, or maybe someone that's just, around in the break room talking with someone in talent acquisition and giving them information that they didn't share back with HR. And then we've got, maybe they did go back to HR, but it wasn't about the position that they talked with talent acquisition about. And so that information was still left over there. And then they're talking with them about something different, maybe about a performance review for someone completely different. And then they've got, talent acquisition teams coming back to the hiring managers or the team leads and saying, hey, I found this great person that might be a great fit for your team. Why don't you take a look at their resume? And again, not informing HR of what's going on. And HR is like, well, we're already going to be, adding to that team in the next quarter. We don't have the budget for it right now. They know things that the talent acquisition team does not. So that happens. And then that's not getting communicated back over. And then we've got hiring managers going back to the human resources people. And then we've got the human resource people going back to talent acquisition and vice versa. And then maybe they have a weekly meeting. Are you getting my point? Like, this is confusing. This is overwhelming. It gets worse. It gets worse. So all to say, that is the reason for this third bucket. It's so crucial. It's so crucial. I'm not going to say it's the most important piece of content that we're going to cover today, but I'm going to say it's pretty far up there. It's really important that we have ownership and ownness. Okay. So this is about feeling clear and confident in your role and what your role is. Okay. So as we talk about ownership and ownness, maybe some of you have never heard the word ownness before, but what's the difference? What's the difference between the two? Why can't we just have ownership and just do it and execute it? Well, ownership is the act, state, or right of possessing something. Ownness is actually from the Latin word spelled O-N-U-S, meaning burden. Okay. But upon translating it into English, it kind of got, translated a little differently to say, okay, now it's known as responsibility, okay, and or duty, okay? So why do you need both? Ownership means you have a key, just like this picture shows here. And ownness is what you do with the key or keys that you've been given, okay? That's why it's important that we not just have tools like these execution matrix slides before, but we actually know how to execute those things. And so the way that we're going to know how and the why and the where and the when and the what and all that stuff is not by us staying more isolated and just taking those matrix slides back to ourselves or back to our talent acquisition teams or back to our HR teams and not collaborating together. So what I would like to propose is a little bit of a different format here for us to be able to look at working collaboratively as a team. So this is one of the many different forms that I've used for a team alignment meeting. You can do this in Slack, you can do it in Teams, you can do it in Asana, Monday.com. You can do it in a whole bunch of different project management platforms. You could just share it in a OneNote or in SharePoint, whatever you want to do. Point being is you need to have some sort of a structure or a framework to have regular and clear meetings that address these specific execution matrix formats that we talked about before. So the thing that I like to make sure to mention to the teams that I work with is, number one, if you didn't document it, it didn't happen. Just like you hear from HR all the time, right? I don't know if that's an HR phrase or if it's a staffing brain phrase that's just stuck in my head and it haunts me all the time. But if you didn't document it, it didn't happen. And we need to know what happened so that way we have a little bit of that accountability that goes with ownership. But the phrases that I have listed in the top left here, top right, are information shared is instruction. Information not shared is incomplete. It might as well be a dream that you had at some point. And it's just about as tangible as that. It's very fleeting. It doesn't really mean a whole lot. It cannot be executed on. It doesn't really relate to anything. People will forget, we're all human. So this is a great way to come together as a team. If this happens weekly, great. Sometimes that's not possible with how busy everyone is. If this happens monthly or even bi-weekly, you're doing real great, okay? If you could do a couple of things where you're just writing out some objectives, you are going around the table and you're saying, hey, let's do some roundtable updates maybe on those 3 buckets of, engagement, experience, and expectations. How are we doing on getting each of these things done? Do we feel like we're doing well in this area? Do we feel like we're slacking a little bit? And then what are the blockers? Try not to be too verbose or too wordy here or get too up into the all of the nooks and crannies of the blocks or the problems. Let's be about the solution. And so we're going to get to action items shortly after. So we spend very, very little time in the blockers category here, but we need to know what the blocks are to us getting certain objectives done. We need to know if there are any. So this is a great framework. We always list who the attendees were. We always mark the time and date, unless you have a system that automatically records that for you. But we want to just make sure that we document where we're at, so that way we can see month to month, week to week, even year over year, the efforts that are being done to support our workforce strategy. Okay, you can do this with recruiting objectives, you can do this with D&I objectives, you can do this with so many different things. But point being, use this tool. Take it, use it for whatever you'd like to use it for. Take it and make it your own. And I'd love to work with anyone on creating some specific execution matrix formats for your team, and also hosting some of these alignment meetings for you. I can do that, show you how to do it, and teach you to fish instead of just giving you a fish if you'd like. So those are the done for you strategies versus the DIY strategies that I've offered with Ardent Services as well. So shameless plug there. We'll keep moving on. So again, in these meetings, another helpful framework for me is to remember that we're reverse engineering. We're starting with the end and we're reverse engineering from where we want to get to. Inspect what you expect. That's another phrase that I picked up from, a manager that I had in the staffing industry. And we had a lot of high priority, high stress environments that we worked in, and they were constantly focused on inspect what you expect. And boy, did they ever. They got right up in your business and they knew it better than you did. And I'm not saying that everyone has to be that type of micromanager, but I am saying that it is helpful to inspect what you expect so that way you can get some tangible, trackable results. Okay. You need to know where you're going. Otherwise, you're going to think that you're going to that true north and then wind up somewhere on the West Coast, if you know what I mean. So third most important thing, I think you already know, my collaboration over competition mindset is going to tell you, please, please, please work together. Please work together. Find more ways to work together. Be comfortable working together. There is no I in team. There's all these great phrases I could give you about why it's important to work as a team. There are also a lot of teamwork and collaboration statistics that I can send you later, or you can take a snapshot of them now if you'd like. But point being, there are a lot of great reasons to work together. But especially when it comes to workforce strategy, you're not going to succeed if you're not. Okay. So here we are to this fourth bucket. We are at this fourth bucket of that contact concept. What is that, Tiffany? What are we talking about? These reciprocal efforts that make or break your success. They will make or break your team. They'll make or break your mentality. they'll make or break your spirit. They really do make it or break it in this contact concept. So I'm going to explain what that means. So in thinking about the contact concept, I have had a lot of teams. I'll admit, I've had questions myself about how much impact or influence do I really have? How much influence can I possibly have? I don't want all this influence, or maybe I do want a lot of influence, but I feel like I can't really make an impact. So that's where this contact concept came into my brain. Okay. And I've used it with a lot of other teams. And the reason I bring this up often is because we need to kind of address what everybody's feelings are about teamwork. Some people aren't great in working, as a part of a team or kind of being accountable to others. So we have to show them how. We have to help everyone understand what their part is, as we just did, but we also have to drill down into some of these factors. Okay, so here are some of the factors that we could consider. Mindset matters. Okay, so my mindset towards working with other people, let alone a team on a group initiative and workforce strategy, is going to be important. So each one of us holds a set of beliefs, attitudes, and a mindset, which determines how we interpret situations. If we had a terrible experience in working with a team and someone who took all the credit or someone who threw us under the bus, we got bus rolled, we're not going to want to work as a part of a team. And so we're going to start, isolating and kind of staying over here and only coming to those meetings that you have for team alignment and saying, this is what I did, this is what I didn't do, this is what I'll get done later, and that's it. Their brain is checking out. So we've really got to help in the terms of, working together, that collaboration piece and addressing everyone's mindset. So it'd be helpful to kind of start here and assessing where everyone's mindset is. Talk as a team, both early and often about, how they're feeling, and how working as a team is going for them. Impact of interactions is the next thing that we should consider. So the impact of our interactions, what I mean by that is that your interaction with Sue or Sue's interaction with Johnny is not just stopping at that single point, of contact. It's not stopping there. The way that my interaction with Sue is going to impact the way that Sue interacts with Johnny, which is going to impact the way that Johnny interacts with other people on his team. It may also impact the way that the other people on their team goes home and how they interact with others at home. And then that kind of creates this, tidal wave effect of coming back to us in the workplace. Okay. There's a lot of really great partners that I work with through Ardent Services, and a lot of great studies and work that they've done on, how to look at the entire, work-life balance structure and how it's so broken, but more importantly, how we're addressing the impact of our interactions, both inside and outside the workplace. Okay. So just thinking about appreciating those socially transmitted impacts, as well as what your impacts at work are doing to that human that goes home into their families and into their homes. So that is another thing to really consider. And why do we want to consider that when we're talking about workforce strategy? Well, because when we all show up as our authentic selves and we're able to take ownership and responsibility, then our expectations are clearer. Our experience is much better. Our engagement is much higher, which means that we're all going to get a lot more done. Okay. It trickles all the way back into the beginning of what we were talking about in this presentation. So stick with me. Clarity is crucial. Okay. Things that we should consider also in terms of ownership. Again, remember, we're talking about ownership and ownness. Clarity is crucial. If I don't know what my part is, how am I going to do it? How am I going to be able to show up and make a great impact? How am I going to keep the right mindset if I thought, oh, I thought I did my job, and actually my job had a whole list of other things that I should have been focusing on? I mean, it's difficult if we don't have clarity in our roles here. So people support you because they value both your vision and your activities. And when we think about how your vision and your mission motivates others, we want to make sure that we are all kind of in this together and that we all have clarity. So everyone wants to support you, but clarity is crucial. Okay. And lastly here, this consistent authenticity, investing time, building solid relationships with team members can lead to significant long-term benefits. Okay. But consistency in small actions is essential. It does not make a difference if you are working with each other and maybe you're sitting down with that senior leader, and you're the HR professional and you're saying, hey, I really want to talk with you about, your team and how I can support you and, putting these skills assessments together. And I want to help you in developing this employee. They're really like fast tracking and they're really smart. We want to make sure to retain them and develop that talent. And then you just never talk to them again until the next time they need something. That sort of interaction or lack thereof happens so frequently in this workforce strategy ecosystem. So it's really difficult. And that's why I think people get really overwhelmed by too much peopling, right? But if you can create some consistency in your communication or some check-ins, it doesn't mean you have to have a 30-minute meeting every day or every week with someone, but it means that you're going to be consistently, authentically involved in developing a relationship with this person. It's going to make you all better. The more you know about each other, the more you can support each other, and empowering each other. That's the next phrase there, is empowering each other by giving autonomy and encouraging them to take initiative can lead to higher engagement and innovation. So consistent authenticity. This is one of my favorite phrases or favorite slides of the entire presentation, because it talks about all of these great factors that are not going to be found in a lot of workforce strategy tools that you'll see. They're not the standard, factors or methods that you employ when you're thinking about workforce strategy. You're like, how am I getting my performance reviews done? How am I hiring my teams? How am I pipelining? Like, where's my skills assessments? That's what your brain is thinking. And I love the execution brain. I love the, let's get a checkbox initiative out of the way. Let's make sure that we're getting it done. But these are the things that we need to consider when we're talking about ownership and how we're all staying accountable to each other. Okay, so I hope these factors that we need to consider help, and that you can take even just one of them into your teams. But let's also share some information about the ripple effect. This is something I can send to you later about these additional resources, these articles that I found about the ripple effect, and just an effective mindset towards your impact on the rest of the organization or on your team. But I want you to see your part. Okay. That's what all of this has kind of gotten us into, this contact concept. So seeing your part, I put a quote in here that I actually learned from the service industry. Way back in the day when I worked in the service industry, I had a manager that said, if you see it, it's your job. I was like, well, great. That's a lot to think about. But what they meant was, if I see something is dirty, if I see something is out of stock, if I see that somebody needs help, it's my job. And that simple phrase has benefited me throughout the rest of my career. Not to say that I, took a magnifying glass to everything, like what else can I make my job? This is not giving us liberty to just take on other people's roles and responsibilities as our own. And it's not, blinding ourselves, like saying, I don't see it, so it's not there. But it is kind of taking a moment to look at something. So I said this, not this, and not this either. So we're wanting to take a closer look. You want to take your glasses off and maybe kind of step out of your own head for a second and say, oh, that's something I see that maybe isn't working just quite right. Or this is something that I'm seeing that affects or impacts something that I do in my day-to-day role. So I want to know how to help and how to do my part in this. So again, it's not taking a magnifying glass and trying to really hone in on the inefficiencies or the inaccuracies or whatever. We're not here to find all the problems and just be a constant heat-seeking missile to problems. That's a valuable tool, and I've actually called myself a heat-seeking missile in other roles before. But being able to find those solutions is really important, and seeing your part is where it starts. You do not go in, with all of the knowledge. You do not go in, saying that you know everything. But we want to know what our part is so that we can start to move towards a solution together. Okay. So, in answering the question, whose job is it anyway? It's mine. It's yours. It's everyone's job. It's everyone's job. This workforce strategy, again, as I said in the beginning, and I'll say again, if you forget that this is a collaborative effort and that there is not a single person, not a single professional or executive, senior leadership team member, HR professional, TA specialist, anything. There's no business partner I've ever worked with that has been able to execute or develop or execute a workforce strategy all by themselves. It doesn't exist. It doesn't happen. So this is all of our jobs. This is everyone's job, and we're all made better for it. So I hope you got some great elements to take back to your teams. Again, these webinars are designed to be able to give you some things that you can snapshot. You can just send right over to your teams, but you also can contact me, and I can also send you these slides. Working with Ardent Services and working with me particularly not only gives you a customized strategy and a customizable way that we can work together to make sure that your teams are efficient, or even having someone that's objective and just a total third party that can help in making sure that everyone's staying on track. I'm here to help. But I would be remiss if I did not mention our strategic partnerships. The last webinar that we did, we said something different about why it's beneficial to work with strategic partners. This webinar, or this topic, I think in workforce strategy, we need to remind ourselves that we cannot cover all areas of the field. Again, we can't expect one person to play all positions or to do all things when it comes to workforce strategy. And also, even if we have a really, really great dream team, we want to make sure that there are support functions, that there are, great resources, and that there are great, training and conditioning around each of those star athletes on your dream team. Okay. So that's what strategic partnerships do. They strengthen and supplement your team's efforts. Okay. So there are a lot of different ways that Ardent Services works with these partners. Again, coming in with some of the tools and resources that we offer, you can see that on our website, but going beyond recruiting and that retention piece, going into the talent development piece, employee engagement, even some employee well-being, and also some community engagement efforts. We've got some amazing partners that we'd love to have you work with. Just feel free to check that out at ardentservices.org, or contact us directly. There are a lot of things that they do. We definitely don't have enough time to get into that today, but they do things like talent development, employee engagement, inclusive culture, bias reduction, all of these great things that we'd love to introduce you to. And here is a list of all of them. Here are all of the partners that we work with, that we're very happy to work with and very proud to work with. If you have any questions about any of these, again, you can go to ardentservices.org to be able to check them out and be able to go to each of their websites, or just schedule an initial consultation, and we'd love to invite them to get them introduced to you. And so we are looking forward to a few other things coming up. This is a way to connect with us. You can also scan this if you are on your laptop and you want to take your phone out and you want to just take a second to scan this. It'll bring you to a Calendly link to be able to schedule a call with me if you have any questions. We can also be found on LinkedIn and soon on other social media platforms as well. This is a recording, so it'll be shared out later. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. Our upcoming events, we do live Q&As Tuesdays at 2. We're going to do a lot more talent talk, so I would check LinkedIn for that, for all the upcoming events on our schedule there. But you can also check us out, follow us on socials, just to be able to get more access to our weekly newsletters, which kind of encapsulates all the great things that we're doing week over week. We also do book reviews. We've got a new bookshop out, which we'll probably highlight in upcoming webinars, but we are really looking forward to all of the exciting stuff we have coming up in the future here, and we would love to partner with you. If you want to be a part of our upcoming events, either as a part of that live Q&A and you want to just host a discussion together, we can do that. If you want to be a guest speaker on one of these webinars and you want to go through a specific content piece with me and we can just kind of interview each other back and forth, I'd love to do that. We also do panel discussions and a lot of other really cool things. And so I'm looking forward to connecting with all of you. I hope to see you at the next live Q&A, which will be Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Central. And then we usually do our webinars on Thursdays at 3 p.m. Central. Okay. So again, thank you so much. Likes and shares are appreciated. Please share this with your teams. Again, if you'd like any of the slides, you can contact me and you can share these slides with your teams, make them your own, or contact us to have a customized packet of these slides made for you. And again, thank you all very much for coming, and we will take questions right after this.